Welcome to the Your Music Industry Podcast.
The podcast that gives you a direct route into the music industry's greatest minds. Your Music Industry is proudly brought to you by the Liverpool Audio Network with your host, Daniel Fisher-Jones.
Hello and welcome to Your Music Industry episode number 4. It's an absolute pleasure to be releasing an episode every single Monday, giving you a wealth of priceless value and insight on the music industry. On this episode, we're exploring the world of audio engineering and studio producing with a gem of an engineer and producer from Liverpool. But first, before we progress with this episode, I want to mention something extremely special about today. In 2 months' time, it is the Liverpool Audio Network's first birthday, and we have something extremely special planned. Announcing today is Link, the Electronic Sound Summit. On Saturday, the 2nd of February, we're hosting our most valuable and impactful event yet. We're taking over not only one, not two, but 5 venues in Liverpool city centre to run a spectacular day of electronic music industry masterclasses, talks, panels and even hardware sessions. To find out more, head over to our social media at Liverpool Audio or visit electronicsoundsummit.co.uk. On to this episode. Our guest for this episode over his career has worked with world-renowned artists such as Bring Me the Horizon and Cast. He's also head honcho at the Motor Museum, an extremely unique studio complex in Liverpool, which over its history has seen the likes of Oasis and the Arctic Monkeys record in the space. And funnily enough, last week it marks 6 years since Al took over the Motor Museum. So stay tuned. But first, this episode and platform of you being able to learn from the likes of Al wouldn't be possible without our sponsor, Splice. By supporting this podcast, they're supporting your growth as an artist and as an individual. As a creative artist in the world of sound, you need the best tools for the job. Some of those tools will include the likes of VST synths and sound files, aka samples. Splice is the subscription platform for exactly that. With a vast array of over 1 million samples, they cater to every genre and creative spark. Each sample is thoroughly tagged, enabling you to smoothly explore their whole library. Having tags such as the key of the sample, you have the power to explore an array of samples that harmonically resonate with your track. With filtered search in seconds, you can be finding inspiration and sample files that not only harmonically fit with your track, but are also of extreme high quality. Splice Sounds comes in the form of a monthly subscription, which, for only $7.99 a month, gives you access to this whole sound library. And on top of that, Splice have kindly offered every single listener of this podcast 1 free month. Use the code Liverpool Audio to obtain your free month, or head over to splice.com/Liverpool-audio. Without further ado, it's time for the conversation with Al. When editing this podcast, it was a real struggle to shorten it down, as it's a goldmine of insight and full of an unreal story about Al's past. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to this episode's guest, Liverpool-based studio producer and Motor Museum head honcho, Al Groves.
So I think it'd be interesting to kind of start off with who you are, where you came from, and I know off mic a minute ago we mentioned about where you got into music, so if you just want to talk about that and maybe take it from there, your story really.
So I got into it all started really when I was 17, just about to leave college and after my A-levels and things, and didn't have any ambition to have a career in music at all. I was really really into playing music and a real hardcore musician, and happened to be watching a documentary of, I think it might have been AC/DC or some old school rock band, and it was a making of their record, and it had a lot of studio footage. I was watching it on the DVD thinking, that looks dead good fun, that looks amazing. I didn't really know quite I knew it was a recording studio, but I didn't really know about a career or how you got into that kind of thing, or if that world even really existed anymore. So just out of curiosity, I spoke to the careers person at my uni and said I might have a change of heart. I'd already signed on to do a software engineering degree because all my mates were doing it, and when you're a kid you play loads of computer games, and I had this vision of earning a lot of money hacking computers building computer games and doing that kind of thing, and the reality was quite different, I think. So I went to my careers advisor and I said, I think I might be interested in music in some sort of career. I haven't got any music qualification other than kind of like vocational ones. And we had a look through the UCAS book, and she basically said, unless you redo all your A-levels and kind of start again, you're not going to get into any university. So I didn't really think anything of it. I said, that's fine, I'll just have it as a hobby or as a nice thing. Got to Liverpool, and then I did a week, maybe even less than that. Within 3 or 4 days of going to the software engineering courses or the lectures, I knew instantly I didn't like it. It wasn't it was just not going to be how I envisaged it. And I had a week where I had a bit of a crisis, really thinking, what the fuck am I going to do? Excuse my French, what am I going to do? And in that week, I remember vividly meeting a guy who was at Lipper, who was in his 3rd year at Lipper, who became a really good friend of mine for a while. And we used to go to the pub basically every day. And at this time, I was kind of a bit lost, wondering what was going to happen. So I was going to the pub more than maybe I would do otherwise. And we were in the Pilgrim, which is opposite Lipper. And he said to me, I just come up to the studio because I've just got to pick something up on a USB stick. So I went up there and he opened the door to the recording studio, and I looked around and I thought, this is what I've seen on this DVD, and had this kind of light bulb moment of going, wow, this is what I should be doing really, and it's on my doorstep and I can do this. And he kind of got me going. He told me a bit about the career and about how it works and what the life is like of it. And I just thought, that sounds amazing. So then I spent a few weeks wondering whether I could get into Lipper, and realised the same thing. I didn't have any of the right A-levels to get into there. So canned that idea pretty quick, and I thought, I'm just going to do it by myself. So I got given a dodgy copy of Cubase, and I started buying loads of crap, cheap gear, and just started to teach myself how to record things, like how to move the microphones, really basic level, recording me doing stuff. And after about a year, I have another friend of mine who's a bit older than me, who was a hobbyist musician, really avid one from Merseyside, and his career was, he was a pharmacist, so his career wasn't in music at all, but he'd always had music as a side hobby, and like quite a serious side hobby. And he was starting a family, and his pharmacy was getting busier and busier, and he realised that he couldn't really pursue music as a side hobby anymore, and he wanted to do something with it. Yeah. So we were talking one night, and he said, I've always wanted to set up rehearsal rooms. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, because I need to find somewhere to have a recording studio, because at this time I was recording in my student house, and all my mates would go away for summer, and I'd have 4 bedrooms now, which were my live room, so I'd make a studio out of that. I'd bring all the people, it was on Lark Lane, I'd bring all the people, all the bands I would meet on Lark Lane, and I'd record them for free, or for like a can of beer. And we'd just record all weekend, and that's how I learned how to do it. So that wasn't really cutting it for much longer, so my friend Mark said, that's why I said to my friend Mark, funnily enough, I need a premises to make it into a recording studio. Why don't, if you find some pracky rooms and you want to set that up, rather than you paying somebody to run them or you having the burden of running them, why don't you give me a room for free, and in return I'll manage it all day to day for you, and I'll just run it and make sure it operates. I said, that's a great idea. So we kind of shook hands and went for that. And then as I was thinking about how to design my studio, and he was asking me, what would you make it like, I started sending him photos of Abbey Road and Sarm and Parr Street, all these real old school, huge, glossy looking studios. And he kind of started sending me these messages going, this looks really cool. How much does this cost? And what does this look like? And who builds that? And it just kind of snowballed into, he suddenly thought rehearsal rooms are dingy and crap. We should build a recording studio together. So we spent the rest of that year, which I can't remember, 2005, I think it might have been, looking for premises. We were all over town looking for somewhere, and eventually ended up in a place called Sandhills, which is 2 miles north of town where we are now. And we found the basement of this old cotton warehouse, or tobacco warehouse, and it was perfect. It was right next door to some rehearsal rooms, so we had clients instantly on the doorstep. And he basically funded everything to get going, and in return I dropped out of uni and I just went full steam at trying to, it wasn't so much running a business because he did that, but I just went full steam at trying to build a studio, reputation, and build a client base, and actually start making tunes with people. And it just went really well. I think, I wouldn't say I knew what I was doing, but I think I was really enthusiastic to make sure I did a good job. I really took it really seriously and wanted to be good. So, all right, I maybe made a lot of mistakes early on, but was willing to put the time in to either correct them or to get around them or to prevent them or whatever. And I just lived for that. I was at that studio for 6 years, and I just lived in that studio all day, all night. I slept there quite often and just recorded. I mean, I just went mad for it, you know.
Yeah.
And that's basically how I got started. And I've never really looked back too much, to be honest. Well, I have, but very briefly, and gone, that looks rubbish, and keep going forward. You know?
So from that point, Sandhill Studios, is that still running, or did that come to an end?
So Sandhills, when Mark and I moved out to take on the lease in the Motor Museum, Sandhills lay dormant for about a year. Then somebody tried to run it, but never actually opened it. So they went in, tried to fill it full of gear, got fed up, took all the gear back out and sold it. Then it's now owned by a friend of mine who runs it as a private recording studio for him and his bands. Somebody else, I think, has a small recording studio in there, and I think he has other rooms which are kind of like private rehearsal rooms. So it's basically his space for him and his close friends network. So it's not really, it might be a commercial space, but it's not kind of, I don't think it's that much of a publicly commercial space. But he's a good friend of mine, and he wants somewhere to, his is like a very much a passion project, so he wants a space to do that from. And
awesome. So you just kind of teased a big part of your current career, which is Motor Museum. So talk us through how that happened. What it is.
The Motor Museum is it's probably my favourite recording studio, and I understand I'm biased, but even without that, it is my favourite recording studio I've ever worked in. It's been around, I think it's 30 years old this year. I'm pretty positive. It is on Lark Lane, so it's South Liverpool. It's a big, massive warehouse, then with a recording studio built inside it in this vision of a kind of Mediterranean village. It's full of palm trees and orange trees and yucca plants, and it is literally Mediterranean. And it's amazing. It's been passed down from kind of generation to generation of different producers, and it's been incredibly successful. Not, you know, over the years, not necessarily under my watch yet, but it's had some real history in it, and I'm you know, endeavouring to continue making that history, really. But I got involved with the Motor Museum. Ironically, actually, when I was looking for studio premises before I met Mark, I was ringing around all the recording studios in town asking if there's any work experience, or can I come and help out, can I get involved in some way, realising, you know, that was a long shot, but, you know, give it a shot. And one by one, they all basically said no, you know, or you need to get some sort of experience before you get to this level first. We can't just let you in, type of ththing. So, okay, sound. Got a little bit frustrated by that, and I think that was the point where I just said, I'll just do it myself. You know, don't need all those guys. But remember speaking to Andy, who's the landlord who owns the Motor Museum that I lease it off now, and he gave me quite a lot of advice, and he gave me a good phone call, whereas everybody else was just kind of, no. So that was really good, and that stuck with me, actually, that he had some actual pragmatic advice, you know, go and record some bands and go to loads of gigs, and, you know, maybe we'll see you in the future. So that was nice. So fast forward, what must be 6 years, something like that. And I am friends with a really successful producer called Mike Crossy, who from 2008 to 2012 leased the Motor Museum. And Mike and I tried to engineer for Mike when I was quite young, and it didn't really work out that well. And I think I was just too hungry to be the producer on the sessions, and it didn't really gel with Mike very well. But we did gel as friends and as drinking buddies and as kind of like passionate. We're both I'm an aspiring producer. I'm just 10 years behind him, but we both kind of connected on that level. And so Mike and I used to hang out quite a bit and you know, talk shop. And Mike knew that I was feeling like I was coming to the end of my time at Sandhills because of a number of reasons. The location it was in, it was really difficult to attract clients at a level that I needed to be working in to further my career. Just physically, the building was holding me back a little bit. I felt like I got everything I could out of that design of the building, and I couldn't make the ceiling higher. I couldn't expand because of the fixtures of it. I was kind of getting a bit stagnant in there, getting a bit frustrated, really. So Mike decided that Mike met his current wife, and various things in Mike's career happened. He wanted to go back down to London. He felt that's where his lifestyle should be. He told me in, I think it was March of 2012, that he's looking for someone to take over the Motor Museum because he would like to move to London, but doesn't want to leave Andy in the lurch. So he doesn't want Andy to have no one to take over the studio. And he said that this kind of like is the golden opportunity, because you know you're stuck at Sandhills. I am kind of ready to go. This is perfect for you, you know. And I'm not going to give it to I'm not going to tell anybody else about it until you've said to me yes or no. So, you know, it was kind of like, wow, okay, this is cool. So I spent about 2 weeks going backwards and forwards with Mike and Mark at Sandhills, trying to go over all the numbers, the cost of running it, what kind of budgets did our clients have, it basically working out, is it feasible? And I decided it wasn't, and I was kind of gutted really, and I had to go back to him at the end of March and say, I'm really sorry, I really want to do this, but I just don't think I can take on that level of responsibility yet. I don't think I can make it work. And Mike said, well, don't worry about it, lucky for you, and I didn't know it was lucky for me at the time, but lucky for you, I've just signed on to do what was going to be then, I think, the Ben Howard record and the 1975 first record back to back. Said, I'm doing those in the Motor Museum, so I can't go now anyway, and, put that idea off. Right, okay, great. So I just carried on as normal through summer of 2012, and I kind of was bashing my head against the brick wall a little bit and wondering what the future held. And then I got a text from Mike on something like Sunday night out of the blue saying, hey Al, it's Mike, we should go for a beer this week, I'm leaving for London on Friday, I probably won't be back for a long time, when are you free? I was like, shit, my mate's gone, I was a bit kind of going, I'm going to miss him. And then as I read down the message, it said, P.S. I've told Andy you're taking over the Motor Museum, expect a call. I was like, right, okay, as that hit me, the next message was from Andy McCluskey. Hey Al, this is Andy McCluskey, lovely to meet you. Mike tells me you'd like to take over the Motor Museum, that's fantastic news. Are you free to meet for a coffee? We can talk about it. I was like, right, okay. So Mike gave me a great big push. So I was dead excited, but I was also a bit nervous. Went to go for a coffee with Andy, instantly really liked him, felt very comfortable, very eager to hope that we could work something out. Andy was really good and accommodating, and he's just a really nice guy, really. He's become a friend, really, out of all that. And basically one thing led to another, and we realised, we'll just go for it. And if it doesn't work, no hard feelings, but we'll just try and make it work. And Andy gave me a good opportunity, and I just jumped at it, really. And that's what's taken me onto this, to where we are now. And I've been there for nearly 6 years now. It's just flown by. But it was I would say, a definite leap of faith. Touch wood.
Yeah, I'd like to mention that, because that is a big leap of faith for you previously, before, to work out the financial side of things and see it's not feasible, to then be pushed and then it's become successful, must be so kind of liberating in a sense. Like,
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's as challenging now as it was 5.5 years ago. It does feel nice. It's a good compliment. I've learned an awful lot. When I was at Sandhills, I was never really running the business. So I was just running the moving forward. I was never having to deal with any of the challenges, really. So as long as I kept clients coming in and I was getting paid by those clients, that's my responsibility. And I just did the best job I could. That's basically as much responsibility as I was allowed to have. When it got to the Motor Museum, it was mine. And Mark did come with me at the beginning, and then we kind of separated. But basically, I had to run a business and make sure that it didn't fall out from underneath me. And I went in there we literally started from zero. So I picked all my gear up, moved it into the Motor Museum, and with nothing in the bank, and just said, right, we're starting from zero on the cash flow, and we've just got to make it happen. And I honestly don't know how that did happen, to be perfectly honest with you. I think I was very stingy for the first year, didn't buy anything, barely turned the heating on, just so that we had a bit of a float, so that if something went wrong, we could cover it. Did a lot of work myself, a lot of technical work I did myself for the first year, just so I couldn't have to pay anyone else to do it. And then gradually, I mean, the studio itself has an amazing reputation, so I don't really need to do anything there. The work I think, fortunately, people knew me because I'd worked in Liverpool for a long enough time, and ironically, in fact, less now than a quarter of my work comes from Merseyside. It's kind of generally from elsewhere, but at that time I was still doing almost 50% of my workload wasn't even from Merseyside. So people out of Liverpool would see I've moved studios and see the glossy Motor Museum and instantly want to come up. So I was able to spread that network and reputation around a lot wider than just Liverpool. I think if it was just Liverpool, with Parr Street being there and Elevator and some really, really good studios, I think I may have struggled to have enough market to keep it going. So that was nice. And then through being in the Motor Museum, that opened up some conversations that I was previously trying to have, or with music industry people, the labels and things. Previously, they all knew me, and they all, we were all friends, and they knew I was hungry, but I didn't have a facility that they could pump their artists up to. And basically, as soon as I got in the Motor Museum, those conversations changed, and it became, actually, we should give you a shot. We've got this project. Would you be able to? Do you fancy getting involved on this? And it just like floodgates opened a little bit, and it's it is a very. I feel very fortunate to have it, but also very grateful that Mark gave me a huge opportunity when I was 18, and he's given me another big one when I was 24, I think 25, something like that, 25. So it's not necessarily all me. It's definitely help from some influential people, I would say.
And that's pretty young as well, 24, to literally take that leap of faith into that much responsibility. So.
Yeah, I did shit myself a bit. Like I say, there were some challenges that I'm proud of how I've overcome them. But the older I get, the more experience I get, the challenges are always there. They don't necessarily get any easier. It's just I get less frustrated by them, I think, is the kind of the takeaway from all that. And when I sort of see younger friends of mine or younger people who I see parallel to how I first started out or what I did when I was a bit younger, I always kind of say to them, I don't have an answer that you don't already have. It's just I get less phased by these things. I just understand that it will work out in the end. And I think having the Motor Museum has kind of taught me that and Sandhills as well, that even though when I was in Sandhills I felt there were some massive struggles that I couldn't overcome, and to a slightly different degree I look at the Motor Museum and think there are some struggles there that are difficult to overcome. I mean, it's quite an expensive studio to run. It's because it's massive, there's various things that mean it's costly, and all my gear, like, it's got a really old Neve console in it that I love to death, but it's quite fussy and you have to constantly maintain it, and if you let it slip, it costs so much more money to get it back up to where it was. So they're things that I could sacrifice those and not be happy, but be less. It would be less of a cash burden. Yeah. But I don't want to. I want to preserve it and keep it running. And I guess when I kind of speak to the younger guys I know, I say I'm just as frustrated or just as challenged by these things. But I also know that for 11 or 12 years that I've been working, it all just seems to work out in the end. Just let it work itself out sometimes, I think, anyway.
I've really got to give it to Al. He really has worked hard and is a perfect example of how, with hard work, building the connections and having some luck on your side, you can really create a great name and career for yourself. But without the support of our sponsor, Splice, this episode wouldn't have been possible. So make sure you check out the #1 online sample library platform today and claim your free month with Liverpool Audio. Do you have any friends who you think would benefit from listening to this episode? Make sure you share it with them, or even, right now, take a screenshot of this episode and post it on your social media with the biggest thing you've learned today. Don't forget to tag us too at Liverpool Audio and use the hashtag #YourMusicIndustry.
So it's interesting how you said that first year, obviously you kind of kept your outgoings really low to kind of make it stable in a sense.
Yeah.
And through that, you said you learned a lot about like the technical side of things. So in the the bigger pictures, that helped you keep up to say your maintenance on your Neve console and that sort of thing.
So the interesting thing about the first year there was my work kind of really suffered because especially the control room at the Motor Museum sonically is impeccable. It is truly wonderful. I may be over exaggerating a little bit, but I didn't know at the time just how poor the listening environment in Sandhills was, and B, just how potent a really well-designed, well executed acoustic environment is for mixing. And it kind of kicked my ass for a year, really. I really went through the ringer doing a lot of bad work, not through lack of ability, just through having to relearn a lot of things, a lot of techniques, and reevaluate what I was doing, and basically rebuild a lot of confidence. Because I'd gone from what was, let's say, a garage environment to a laboratory environment, and all of a sudden the habits I'd developed in the garage were not going to cut it in the laboratory. So there was a rite of passage I had to go through, I think, to get through that. One on the business side that we talked about, but also on the technical and the technique side, I would say. My technical knowledge isn't really that strong, to be honest with you. It's not very educated at all. It's basically done based on instinct, or kind of like I've proven through application. When if I was to read a document, some sort of technical explanation of something, I could relate it to my experiences in the real world, but I wouldn't be able to necessarily go the other way around. So and luckily the Motor Museum isn't really that kind of studio anyway. A lot of the technical things were dealt with years ago, so I've just kind of walked in and inherited a really technically proficient studio. I just had to learn how to use it and how to get the most out of it, really. But there was a definite light bulb again. I can't remember exactly when it was, sometime around 2013 or 14, when everything just kind of fell into place, really. I had a huge amount of confidence. I had some projects I was doing that I really wanted to have to work out, and they did work out. I don't think necessarily just through me. I think it was just a number of things all fell into place that helped me at the time. Since then, I don't know if I will ever outgrow that studio in terms of what it can do, or what it can allow me to do creatively, because it's got so much character in so many different places. I don't think I have no ambition to ever leave it, really. I'd like to make it warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. And that's about the only thing I would change, really. Otherwise I kind of love it, and I'm very much ingrained in it now. And I think it's the little modifications. I mean, I've not changed a great deal, to be honest. The modifications I've made are more just vanity things, really. But I think that they are reflected in my philosophy as a producer and a mixer, and vice versa. The Motor Museum has kind of infiltrated itself and reinformed my philosophies in the opposite sense as well. It's good. I'm kind of looking forward to going back there later.
So I think to look at your portfolio and experience, per se, of who you've worked with, the bands, some of the biggest bands in the world, per se, how did you even get that on board? Was it with having kind of the stamp of the Motor Museum, or how did you go about it?
Okay, so the most successful record I've done is the last Bring Me the Horizon record. That's probably the best way to make the example. That I got that introduction because the Motor Museum has a partnership with a company called Moloko. Moloko they're based in London, but they're an international booking agency and management agency for recording studios, and they basically take on recording studios above a certain level to represent in various capacities. Some of them they own their own studios. Some people they manage and run the studios for them, and in my case they just act as a booking agent for additional work. The good thing about Moloko is they're very well ingrained with all the London-based record labels. They're very much part of the network. So anytime a label that they have a relationship with is looking for a studio, the A&R coordinator will ring up the Moloko office and say, "We need a studio within this criteria. It's got to have such and such X capacity, drum rooms, get this kind of gear. It's for this kind of artist, and it has to be in this location." So Sony rang up Moloko in August 2015 and said, "Bring Me the Horizon are looking for a studio to record for a couple of days in. They don't want to be in London. They'd like to be in the north of the country. They don't want to travel that far, basically, and all that. What have you got available?" And Siobhan, who was the booking manager at the time, mentioned the Motor Museum. She emailed me and said, "This inquiry's come in." She didn't actually tell me it was Bring Me the Horizon. She said, "You've got an inquiry for a couple of days here. Is the studio free?" And I said, "Yeah, it is." And at the time, and still to the case now, I don't really run the studio. I'm not in-house as such. It's my private facility as a producer, but I don't run it as a recording studio. I have in-house engineers who run that independently, really. So anytime a Moloko session comes in, unless they're directly requesting me to produce, I wouldn't be involved in that. I would manage the booking, and then I would introduce it to the engineer, and he would pick it up. But out of just curiosity, I said, "Yes, it's free. Who's the artist?" And it was kind of me wondering whether I had to clear some space in the diary. If it was an artist that was going to be in for a long time, do I need to rearrange my sessions or whatever? So she came back and said, "Bring Me the Horizon." And I kind of thought, well, that's a coincidence because I'm quite a big Bring Me the Horizon fan from growing up. So I just sent a little sort of a query, what is the project exactly? Have they got someone on board to work with? What's the crack? So she said, "I'll do some digging." She came back a couple of hours later and said, "Nothing's set in stone yet. There's no one specifically applied to work on it. We can put you forward if you want to go for it." I said, "Yeah, definitely." So long story short, it transpired that got put together. And I just got on really well with I think we did 2 days together. We recorded the music for what was their single at the time called Drown. Got on really well with them. Same age, similar sort of, I was going to say similar upbringing. It wasn't really, because at 16 they left school and went to be a huge international band for the rest of their lives. But same musical upbringings, listened to the same tunes, had the same gig experiences and all that kind of stuff. And just think the sounds that I was aspiring to make and executing was exactly what they were looking for, basically. And it just by fluke, those two things came together. So had I not had the Motor Museum then, I don't think I would have had that call. Had I not had 2015 was a little bit of a fallow year for me. It was all right, but I didn't do anything up until that point. I didn't do anything I was particularly excited about. I had a few records I pursued and didn't make the cut on them, so I was kind of a little bit, I wouldn't say frustrated, but just a little bit bored, looking for something to spark again. So when that came in, I was dead hungry for it. So I think had I not have also had the confidence and the sort of like balls, if you were, to say I want to get involved in that project, it wouldn't have happened. And then really doing the project, people said to me, were you nervous and things? I'm thinking, no, at the time I didn't know it was going to be the biggest thing I was going to do up to now. I didn't know that at all. I didn't know whether it was going to work out. So many of those sessions, you do them and they never get released, they never get finished. It's very much like a work in progress thing, and you don't see the fruits of your labour. So I was very much go in there, enjoy it, work dead hard as I do, and put a lot of my effort in, and see where it goes. And luckily, the single did really well. It exceeded the radio. Their goals were daytime radio play, and they smashed it. They got way more than they were expecting, I think, and they deserved it because it was a really good tune. And then I just kept in touch with the band over Christmas, and then speaking to Jordan, who's the keyboard player in the band, and said to him, I was starting to get the impression that an album must be due soon. I know they must be. I knew they were writing it. I was thinking, I need to mention something here, because otherwise they may not. If we're all too polite and no one says what's happening with the album, someone else may get involved, and I meant to do it. So I just said, what is happening with the album? When are you doing it? And can I be on board? Basically, I'd love to join you. And he said, let me speak to management, but yeah, we'd like to have you. And then I got an email the next day from the management saying, this is not what I expected at all, but saying, hey Al, the band are due to head out to Santorini for 2 months to go and make their album. They'd like you to come with them. Are you available? And I was thinking, am I available? Yeah. But I wasn't expecting to go away for 2 months, definitely not. And I wasn't expecting to go somewhere like Santorini. I was imagining, Surrey in the hills, in a barn or something like that. But madly, I actually had to think about it for a couple of days, because having the Motor Museum, I thought, can I just drop everything at the Motor Museum and swan off? I've got my now wife, who was, at the time we were engaged and things, and I thought, that's a big like shift. I want to do it, but can I do it? It was very much like a Motor Museum lease type of deal again. I just had to think through how is it going to work, and just in the end I just went and said, yeah, I'll do it, I'll go for it. And it turned out to be really good, and I really enjoyed it. And again, going out there, wasn't nervous at all. Just go and do what I'm good at and what I enjoy doing. And that's basically on that record. All I had to do was not make a mess of it. Really, everything was ready for them. They had great tunes. They're an amazing band. Whatever they do, they can do really well. They're really good people. So it would have been hard to make a mess of it, really, I think. But yeah, it's like there's no secret to how those things happened. It was a lot of good luck, a lot of being in the right place at the right time, and just being ready when that opportunity came along to grab it and say, yeah, I'm gonna make the most out of this and make sure I do a good job, make sure it does well. And I did.
I think for a lot of people listening in general, to produce, engineer kind of a band you're a fan of must be just absolutely like fantastic. What was your experience with that while like being part of the like production process of music that you're normally in, like you enjoying it?
Well, the nice thing about that record, and the unique thing, is that they wanted to make a record that wasn't like any of the ones they'd made before. They basically wanted to not reinvent the band, but they'd shut the door on the very heavy specialist metal kind of thing that they'd done before, which I was a fan of when I was growing up. But I also wasn't really into that at my age anymore. I kind of moved on from that a while ago. But I still admired them and respected them for that, and had like very fond experiences of listening to their records. So when we first met, I actually put my foot in it a bit, because I didn't know that they had 4 albums when I'd met them. I thought they'd only had 3. And it transpired that their very first album was, they never play it anymore. They were very young when they made it. I think I just missed out on it when I was growing up. I don't know why, I never heard about it. So I was saying, I love your first record, it's got such and such. And they said, that's not our first record, Al. I was like, shit, I've known you for 5 minutes and I've probably just canned this whole session now, but luckily they let me get away with it. But in terms of, because they wanted to move into a new world, into very much a mainstream pop influence kind of world, and that's also what I was pursuing and inspired by, it meant that it wasn't really about, I wouldn't really have known that I was working with a band I already knew had I not known who they were. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They could have been any other band with different faces, and I wouldn't have felt like I'm working with a band that I also love. What was cool was in our sort of downtime when we were hanging out, they would show me or tell me loads of stories about, previous records, previous tours, really good, fun stories to hear, and I had a lot of good laughs with them about that kind of thing. And that was nice to hear. Well, when I was 22 and doing this, listening to your record, you were playing it here, doing this, and this is how it felt to you, and that was quite interesting. But I don't know if maybe because I was 28 when I made that record, so I don't know if because I was taking it really seriously and really wanted it to happen and knew that I had the opportunity to make something, sort of to make a mark. I don't know if I was just really tunnel vision on that really and wasn't bothered about the fan factor too much.
Yeah.
And also we're the same age, so it's not like you're making it with someone. Oddly, when I did the Cast album, I wasn't that aware of Cast until I was introduced to them, and then I had a cursory idea of the tunes, like the big tunes, but I went back and listened to basically everything else I did and realised I've heard so many hits of theirs that I didn't attribute to being that band. And because they're a generation older than me, they come from the glory days of the music industry. So hearing their stories is a little bit, that's more of a fan type of thing. That's a different way of hearing the story. And there's more flattery probably making their record because they sought me out because they wanted to make something that they haven't been able to achieve before, which was a very modern kind of thing. And so I was more empowered because of that, because I felt like, well, maybe it's a little bit more of an experimental way for them to make the record. Whereas with Bring Me the Horizon, it was very much, this is exactly what Al does now, this is what the band are doing now, and those two things are made to go together kind of thing. Whereas with Cast, it was more, they've never done it Al's way, and I've never done it Cast's way, so we're just going to see what happens. And that was nice. But I think working with brand new bands is probably more of a remarkable experience than working with more established bands, because I learn about all sorts of things from new bands, from whether it be their perspective. I learn about myself, I learn about them. I use the newer generation of bands and artists to inform or to set the future 6 months. What's my creative path going to do? What are these bands sort of hinting to achieve? Can I achieve it now, or have I got a toolkit that's going to take us there? Have I got sounds for them and ideas for them? And if I haven't, I'm going to go and create some in the next 6 months, so that next wave of bands, I'm going to have a bag full of production for them. And so that's why I'm very passionate about developing new emerging things. And there's actually one career goal that I've been chasing it for a few years now, and I haven't got there yet, is to take a band from basically, from starting off, taking them through the development stage and then up to the first album and getting the first album produced and done. I've never actually done a first album that has been on a major label, or any kind of, on a proper major label. I've only ever done major label records on established artists, and I really want to get, for personal reasons, I really want to get that goal of being able to take, band who start tomorrow, and then in 18 months' time, us to have our first record out, and then ideally it'll smash it and it'll do really well, etc. That's something I want to get, and I feel that would give me a certain sense of kind of accomplishment personally in my career that I don't think I've quite got yet. So yeah, I don't know who it's going to be yet, but someone must be out there.
We'll keep in tune with that. So I think one thing would be interesting to talk upon is being in the studio with a band. A lot of band psychology can come into play. Would you mind just touching on how you actually work with that kind of thing and what you have to deal with in the studio?
Okay, so God, how long have you got? The most valuable thing I think I've got there is the fact that I am self-taught, and I've just done it at my own behest. I've just done it how I want to do it, and I I'm quite. I like to think I quite like getting on with people. I'm not particularly interested in confrontation. I think I would generally like people to. I like to enjoy myself. I don't have time to do things that I'm not enjoying. I'm quite lazy, really. So if I'm not enjoying something, my attention is gone. So it always has to be fun and something interesting to me. And I think that stands me in good stead because the recording sessions that I do are quite fast-paced. They're quite. I don't take them. I take my work very seriously, but I don't get too stressed about them. I know they're going to work out. So I think that puts, especially younger artists, I think that puts them at ease because they enjoy themselves. They know Al's got it covered. Al's kind of leading things. So I don't really ever feel. I always feel like I'm just spending time with your mates. Even bands that I don't know that well, you always end up building some sort of good relationship with. I could go for a beer with any band I record and look forward to it, kind of thing. And I think that really counts for an awful lot. The other one would be that because I am self-taught and I've kind of done all this off my own steam, because it means that much to me, I know what's at stake. I don't ever want it to end, really, you know. And what probably drives me forward is, I would say more than anything, is I never want to get to a position where if it ever has to end, I never want to look back and go, I regret not making more out of that than I could have done. You know, when I get to 60 and I'm retired, or whatever age I'm going to be then, you know, I don't ever want to look back and go, I could have worked a bit harder, I could have done something more interesting, or I could have done a better job of that record. I always want to look back and go, I've put as much as I can into that. And that's where the satisfaction comes from. And I think that a lot of bands will see that and understand that, and it builds a sense of respect there. But also, because I take it very seriously for me, I take it very seriously for them, and I know that it's their careers, and for young bands, it's like they're... Funnily enough, I was talking to a band I was producing yesterday who are an amazingly talented, promising band, and just going through some hurdles at the moment. And I had to say to them, this means an awful lot to me, but I know how much it means to you, and because we've been working together for a while, we're mates outside of the band, we're mates now, we go for drinks and all that kind of thing. I don't want to cock it up for you, so I'm going to advise you, and I'm going to try and do everything I can to make sure this goes the right way for you. And I think subconsciously that comes through with pretty much every band I work with. Bring Me the Horizon, I think they saw that I really wanted to be there in the room with them. I really enjoyed it, and I've pushed really hard. And I was also quite confident to say, if I didn't think something was good enough, I would say, I think we could do that again, or that could be better, and you know, we should. And they were going, yeah, that's good, let's move on. I was like, you know, can I have a bit more time, or can we have a bit more time to work on that a bit more? We should do that, and I was kind of like quite confident to make the case as to why. And I think that when they saw that when we first started working together, that gave me a good starting point, because I knew that I was happy to say no as much as I would say yes. I wasn't going to kiss anyone's arse particularly, and that I wasn't just there to clock on and clock off, as it were. The psychology is, I mean, who knows if I'm good at it or not? I don't know. Yeah. I hope I'm all right. I think just listen to people a lot as well. Instinct or intuition. If someone looks pissed off, they are pissed off. So don't piss them off more unless there's some good reason to. If somebody looks like they're unsure about something, I make sure that I give them attention, and I don't want them to walk out of that session with something held back that then in a week's time has gnawed away at them, and then they have an issue with me or with the production or with the song, or they lose confidence in something. So I make sure I approach things if I feel they need to be approached. I'm not scared of that. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing, to be open with everybody all the time. And also the thing I've just occurred to me, I forgot about, is every time I start a relationship with a new artist, I always say this is a team effort. Like, we're all equal. We're all part of the same team. I'm a band member, and you're on the production team, like every one of you. And that's how we should look at it. No one's voice is more important than the others, even though I might be louder because I choose to be. That doesn't mean that I feel more important or not. I expect you to be as vocal in everything, put as much input in, because without any of your input, I don't want to be here. Otherwise, I'll just do it myself, and that won't be as cool as if we do it together. Yeah. I think you just kind of project all those kind of ideas, and hopefully people recognize them, and I think that's how it works anyway.
Awesome. So I think it'd be nice to touch upon kind of the lifestyle of, say, working in the studio, because sometimes I bet it's very intensive with hours. How do you keep kind of a healthy lifestyle while in that environment?
So I haven't cracked it yet, I'm totally honest with you. I'm getting good now, though. I definitely have, the three things, there are three distinct milestones for me. One is taking weekends off. That was massive, and my wife pestered me for years to do it, and I just didn't think I could. I didn't think you were supposed to, and also I really enjoyed working, so I kind of didn't want to miss out on anything, really. But the day that I said, you know what, I'm just going to tell all the people I work with, I can't do weekends anymore, and everyone was cool with it. No, it didn't make any difference. What happens now is I work harder Monday to Friday, knowing that I've got Saturday and Sunday away from work to recuperate, and then Monday to Friday I'm lightning again, and I really notice a big difference. And also, ironically, the success of my work has shot up massively, and how comfortable I am, how satisfied I am in the creative work I do has shot up, because I'm just better at what I do now.
Yeah.
So that was one. Having natural daylight in the Motor Museum, which I can't create, that's a fluke, that's it, because it's the building. That's helped hugely. And that has allowed me to work. I actually work longer days now than when I was in my old studio, because I'm healthier. The daylight kind of invigorates me. The fact that you can see when it's nighttime, you can see when it's daytime, you've got somewhere to go outside between, tea breaks and whatnot. That's helped. And then the biggest thing I've done recently is I now live like 1.5 miles from the studio. And I go home for dinner with my wife as much as I can. If there's people in the studio that we know, or if my engineer's there and he can we don't have to chuck people out, then I'll nip off for half an hour, go and have dinner and come back. And that's really nice. That's just a nice sort of like a nice treat each night. Means that I don't feel that I'm putting my wife under a burden because she doesn't see me till late at night. I feel good because I get to see her, I get to eat healthily, and it's a sort of an extra break that you don't normally give yourself. If I stay and have dinner at the studio, even if I might take an hour to have dinner, I'm still with all the same people in the same building. You don't kind of like decompress in quite the same way. And I have a definite thing when I drive back to the studio or walk back to the studio, I'm kind of like preparing myself or thinking of ideas when I walk through the door, which I don't get if I'm in the building all day. They would be the three things I think that have helped. And the fourth thing, actually, probably as important as all the others, is having a really good engineer that I trust who can run the studio behind the scenes so that I'm not really thinking about the studio itself anymore. That's a big one. Don't know if that's helped the lifestyle as much as it's helped my more like my focus on me and the band and the project a little bit more, rather than being there's less distractions in the way, really. Exercise, drink water, eat healthy, all the normal things.
So I think it'd be nice to just touch upon kind of, you mentioned relocating to do certain work, to say in, where is it,
Santorini.
Santorini is Greece, is it?
Yes, in Ireland, off the coast of Greece somewhere.
So what was that experience like? Like you mentioned how approaching it, you had to be, but like the experience of literally moving away for 2 months.
Yeah, okay. I found that a little bit difficult. For the first month, it wasn't difficult, it was just, I wasn't used to it. The band have obviously toured for 12 years, so they are very used to that. So I did get a bit homesick, to be honest with you, and I don't know if it was, I didn't know it was homesick at the time until Jordan actually said, do you think you're feeling homesick? And I think I was. I think I was a bit I don't know what it was really. The band are amazing. They're really generous and, good to be around. The studio is really comfortable and cool. The studio owner is really great. Obviously, Santorini is stunning and cool AF. I think, to be perfectly honest with you, I think being away from my wife was a bit more difficult than I realised it was going to be. But luckily, when Jordan said to me, do you think you're feeling homesick? Then 10 minutes later he said, some of our wives and girlfriends are coming out. Do you want to see if anyone wants to come out for a few days? Which was great. And then I had a few days, a long weekend off and spent time with them. And that totally reinvigorated me for the second month. I think that also, the way that the album was made, we had 2 studios running together in the same building. So I ran the big studio with the kind of big control room and recorded all the music in the main live room. And then Jordan and Ollie we set up the second booth to be their control room and they would write and do vocals and things in there. Because most of the songs changed once we started recording them, and Ollie would rewrite virtually all the vocals and a lot of the melodies as it was developing. So there were times where I would spend 2 or 3 solid days with the band, long days, and we'd do the whole backing track for the song, and then we'd give it to Jordan and Ollie, and they would spend a whole week rewriting it, and it would develop. It came out amazing for it, but there were times when I had a good bit of downtime, and I think that in my mind, going out there, I thought it was going to be intense all the time, and the time would just fly by, and before I knew it, I'd be home. And I think the downtime was comfortable, don't get me wrong, but I just think that I realised actually 61 days is a considerable amount of time. And it wasn't flying as much as, I didn't want it to fly, but it wasn't like, I realised actually I've probably got more time to realise I'm missing home a little bit. But I would definitely do it again. I would just be a bit more prepared, to be honest. I got sunburned about 12 times as well, which didn't help.
Only 12.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
So, the future of the Motor Museum and of Algroves.
Right.
Where's it at? Are you pushing more into mixing side of things than engineering, or where's it looking?
Okay, so I actually don't engineer anymore. That's the Bring Me the Horizon record was the last thing that I had any engineering responsibility on. So I use my in-house engineer to do as much of my engineering as possible now, which I really enjoy. And he's a fantastic engineer. I'm very lucky that I've had 3 amazing engineers in that place that are all going on to do really good things. So I kind of want to let them have their experience in it as well. I would definitely say I would love to move more and more into mixing. Because mixing is really rewarding. I really enjoy it. I feel strong at it. And the lifestyle is really good because I'm not in the studio till midnight most of the time. So it's better, really. But the future for me has to revolve around getting that goal I talked about before, getting an artist from 0 to album 1 successfully. There needs to be a number 1 record again. There needs to be, they're really the 2 things that need to happen. In terms of the Motor Museum, business as usual at the Motor Museum, we're going to repaint it at the back end of this year. We're going to do some sort of cosmetic, maintenance that it needs, but I've been putting it off for a long time. I don't really, to be honest with you, finding time to close it is the most awkward thing, really. But that's coming. But the Motor Museum is great. It'll just keep doing its thing. The wheels keep turning there. There'll be, there's always trickles of gear as and when new fads come in, things chop and change, and that'll keep going. New engineers come in and go. Loic, who I've got there now, I feel really good about Loic. I'm really happy that he's there, and I hope I'll have him for a long time. But it'd be nice for us to have a second, somebody younger that we can bring up again. My career just my radar is on for that amazing artist. I've got some projects that I'm really, really passionate about right now, and any one of those could be the next one. There's kind of 3 things that I'm kind of very excited about, but you never know. You never know whether they will be or won't be, and if they never know whether something that I might get a phone call tomorrow that I'm not expecting or planning for that might be the next milestone. So right now I'm just enjoying being very busy, enjoying feeling really happy about the creative work I'm doing. I'm actually enjoying making the records I'm making and developing them each time. It's not like I'm just kind of doing sometimes you go through periods where you make the same record a couple of times and that's a bit boring. I'm enjoying that each one is kind of progressing now. Beyond that, who knows? I'm still here, I'm still surviving, and that's probably good enough right now, I'd say.
Awesome. So I'd like to ask you a kind of particular question. So this could be financially, time, or anything. But has there been anything over the past 5 years that's been like a huge investment for you that you've seen the most from?
That's a really good question, On a technical level, my speakers, I'm pretty sure, because I don't own the console. The most expensive thing in the Motor Museum is the console, and Andy owns that, so that's part of the lease. The second most expensive item actually would be the Pro Tools system, but to me that's valueless because it's crap. It is what it is. I've spent thousands of pounds on it now, and then in a year's time it's worth less than half that. It depreciates more quickly than a car does, so I don't really count that. The third most expensive thing I've got a set of monitors that are very specialist that I really like, and that happened around about the time I said the light bulb moment with my work in the Motor Museum, where it went from shit to suddenly very good, came when I changed my monitors, and it all just came clear then. So to anybody, if you're talking about like a technical investment, what value have I got most out of a piece of gear? Speakers, without a doubt. On a more like philosophical level, to be perfectly honest with you, taking those weekends off and structuring my time a little bit more effectively has probably seen the biggest gains in what I can do. I'm happier doing it. I'm able to work hard. It's not like I want to work hard now. I always wanted to work hard, but I'm more capable of working harder for longer. And I just seem to be sharper at making better decisions. Things just seem to happen more effectively for me these days, around about the time that I started working Mondays to Fridays solidly. And then, you got me thinking now, the engineers that I've had have been a real godsend. Like Loic now, James before Loic, I had James for 3 years, and then before that for a year I had a guy called Will. They are like intrinsic to my happiness, me being able to do the things I hope to do, and the Motor Museum running so well and having such a good reputation. I think everybody loves those guys, and it's a testament to their. I mean, they're young. You know, when I took James on, he was 21. I think Will was 21. Loic's a couple of years older, but you know, the Motor Museum is their first step in their career, and they learn so quickly. And I just throw them right in. You know, sometimes because I think it's the right way to learn, and partly because I can't really help it. I need someone to just get stuck in straight away because I've got so much to deal with. You know, I'm thinking now, if they were to go tomorrow, I would be a bit stuck, to be honest. So they're probably, I would say, probably the most valuable thing I've got to invest in, beyond the building and the actual premises and things. I don't know if there's to the people listening who don't have engineers, I don't know if that's a bit of a cop-out, really.
So maybe let's cover, say, some tools or actual pieces of hardware that you've got that have been good investments. Say monitors. What monitors are they?
I use Unity Audio Boulders, which are a British company. I mean, I think they're special. There's nothing special compared to any other monitor. They just, the design, all the things about them just suit exactly what helped me. I'm a big believer in understanding a person, my strengths and weaknesses, and probably it's more important to understand my weaknesses than it is to understand my strengths, because then I can put things in place that help combat those weaknesses. And for me, a big one is self-confidence, which I find ironic because I'm very, you know, everyone. I'll try and help people as much as possible, and try and big people, you know, younger engineers and producers up, and I'll try and fill them full of belief. When at the time, sometimes I'm the one who fights the hardest to be convinced I'm happy with what I'm doing. Or what I'm doing is as good as it can be. So having a good set of speakers that you just work really fast on takes away the risk of second guessing, I think is the best way to think about it. So that would be, monitors would be one there. Then tools.
Maybe any plugins, any go-tos or?
What's a go-to plugin? Any of the Soundtoys tools. I don't think I've got like a go-to as such. I think that I look for plugins that you can do lots of different things with, and everything is good. So the Waves plugin, I don't want to sort of like say the Waves plugins aren't as good as they used to be, but I think Waves and other companies are guilty of making lots of things sound the same. So they have virtually the same compressor with different skins, you know, different images. Whereas the Soundtoys stuff, there seems to be an endless amount of things, bending you can do with them. I've never gone, I can't do something with one of those plugins that I wish I could do. So I would say I would struggle without those. Every session I do has a lot of those on, and if you take those away, the sessions wouldn't sound like they do. I've even actually got some artists who have signature sounds now based on some patches I've made in the Soundtoys plugin. Paris 2 Foundation, I work with a lot, have a guitar sound on 3 of their tunes. Well, actually, every tune we've got has had it in some degree. That I now can't use any other artist because it is their sound. And Jamie's bought pedals to replicate the sound that we've created for him. The hardware, like 1073s, the preamps, the ones with the EQs, the actual proper ones, not the DPA, but the proper 1073 channel strip. You could take everything else off me and just leave me those, and I'd be sound. I wouldn't mind. 1176s as well. There's nothing I can't do, or nothing people can't do really well with an 1176 compressor, I think. And then, oddly, I have an old Eventide H3000, which is a multi-effects unit, but mine stays on it's a really classic thing. I mean, everyone in the 80s and 90s and 2000s does it, and still does now, but they've got a patch called micro pitch shift, which is basically just a left and right pitch shift, and you can do it in any plugin will do it, or most plugins will do it, any box. I just happen to have the H3000. But being able to have a really slow, subtle chorus on loads of things in a mix is a secret for me. So the bass, it's like a spreader or a widener, but it doesn't widen it like the waves or the plug-in wideners do, where they like go out of phase. It's not a phase shifting widener, it's a modulation box, really. And too much of it just sounds like chorus, but you can feather things into it to a point where, I mean, you can't, on a podcast, you can't see my hands, but if you imagine something has just gotten broader, the shoulders have gotten broader, or the waistline has broadened. And I think when people are mixing, it's very easy to think about volume. That's an easy one. It's very easy to think about panning. Something can either be left, or it can be right, or somewhere in the middle. But it can't be both of those things. It can't be further out left and right unless it's stereo. If you have a mono source, like a vocal or a bass or any of those things, I sometimes want to make them more stereo. So this widener tool allows me to make something that is naturally skinny have some sort of width to it. And I would be upset if I didn't have that every day. I mean, the masterclass I did for you guys, the kind of point I was trying to make, I don't know if I made it very well, but the point I was trying to make is that you don't need anything specific. It's all the specific tools are more or less based on very basic processes, modulation, or pitch shift, delay, frequency boosting or attenuating, which is basically just volume up and down in certain places, and dynamic adjustment. It's dead basic, but people just make tools that exploit that in a very specific way, I think. These are crap answers. These are
no, they're really good. I think
no one's going to run out and buy philosophy, are they?
No. I think it's quite good. We made sure we haven't got any sponsors from Waves or
I'm sorry, man. I hope I haven't just
no, it's okay. For final question, I think it'd be good to throw something in there, as in if someone is looking to get in kind of the mix and engineering area of the music industry, have you got any tips for them to kind of get in there?
I should do, yeah. I'm trying to think, but I think my way of doing it was unreliable. Like, I think I was just very lucky to have a few right place at right time moments just when I needed them. So I don't want to say to people, go and do it the way I did it, because I think that might be a bit disappointing unless you're very lucky again. Yeah. I'd say more pragmatically, I think places like Lipper and SAE are hugely valuable. I think passing down the knowledge and the training and the sort of like the discipline to, or not even the discipline, sorry, the hunger to want to be really good and be passionate about something is golden. So I don't have much experience with SAE, but I know with Lipper, I think their biggest value is the fact that the lecturers and the staff there, the tutors, are all from a background of pro audio careers, and they all still do it now, and they all love it. They actually all are really passionate about making really good records and the art of making records, and that gets passed down to the students. And whenever I do stuff in those places, I always am really conscious of wanting to pass down like my enthusiasm, even though I've been doing it for a while. I'm more enthusiastic now than I ever have been, and that continues to kind of go that way. So I would say that's why if I was to restart again, I would go to Lipper or SAE or any equivalent and just go make the most of it. Go spend every hour of every day I can possibly book in the studio. You've got a huge amount of bands in those places. Grab all the bands in and just go and learn how to be an expert, and then see where that takes you. And if you're, I don't mean to say if you're good, but if you give it your best, you will be recognised as good, and you'll come out to the side and think there will be doors there. Be really persistent with it, but don't email me more than once, because I haven't got any work experience placements. And just be prepared to drop everything to do it for a long period. I mean, I say all the time I was at Sandhills and the first 4 years at the Motor Museum, or maybe 3 years of getting that rolling and getting acclimatising there, I really had to drop everything to do it. I had to sort of I had to sacrifice holidays and try. When Sandhills was opening, all my mates were finishing uni and they went off to Thailand for 3 months, or went across Europe and did all this, and I didn't do any of that. I don't regret that, but I just had to. And at the time, I had no interest in doing that. But I would say, if it was my son in the future wanting to get into audio, I'd say, well, you're going to have to be prepared. If you want to be really good and actually make it worthwhile, you're going to have to be prepared probably to sacrifice all that. and just dedicate 110% of your time and your resources to pursuing it, because it takes years to be really good. And the progression and the learning curve is very, very steep, and then very flat, and then very steep and very flat. And you've got to go through the flat times to get to the steep times again, I suppose. And if you're distracted by other things, you're not going to, it's going to take a lot longer. I think that would be the best. That would be the best ones, I would say.
So for the people listening, where can people find you online?
You can, so the motormuseum.com is like a parallel site. So that's a site for the recording studio and for me as a producer. So you get to there and you can kind of go one of two ways. I'm managed by a guy called Pip Newby, who his company's called Friends vs Music, and he's friendsversusmusic.com. So if you're interested in me producing, you go through Pip and we can talk there. And then all the social media stuff, Motor Museum Studio on Instagram, I think, and Motor Museum 1 on Facebook and whatnot. And you can come to the studio. If people want to, we do tours all the time. People want to come and see it and ogle it in person, just give us an email, give us a ring, and we can sort all that out.
Yeah, I think we'll have to take up your offer on that.
You've never seen it, have you?
No.
Yeah, well, come, you know what? Come down.
Yeah.
We'll just arrange a time and come and say hello. It's nice. It's good. Especially this time of year when it's sunny as well, and all the sun shines through the skylights and all the plants are lit up and stuff. It's really nice. It's a good vibe.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Al.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Nice one. I enjoyed that.
What an unreal episode with Al Groves. I thoroughly enjoyed recording, editing and releasing this episode. It's a conversation that for me just completely flowed and allowed Al to thoroughly express his journey, insight and most of all his fantastic personality. Make sure you follow Al online to stay up to date with everything he's up to, as he's got some fantastic things planned for 2019. Once again, I can't express my thanks more to Splice for sponsoring this episode and investing in your personal and creative growth. It's fantastic knowing that there are companies out there in the music industry that do want to help contribute to the development of grassroots artists. So make sure you head over to splice.com/Liverpool-audio to obtain your free month and get creative with the power of Splice Sounds. I'll be back next Monday with another episode. See you then.